Hello and welcome back to my blog. Tea Leaves, Francis S. Drake, Part 19. William Tudor, then a law student in the office of John Adams and acquainted with some of the members of the Tea Party, gives in his Life of James Otis the following account of it. A band of 18 or 20 young men, no one of whom was in any disguise, who had been prepared for the event, went by the meeting house giving a shout. It was echoed by some within. Others exclaimed, "The Mohawks are come!" The assembly broke up, and a part of it followed this body of young men to Griffin's Wharf. 3 different parties composed of trustworthy persons, many of whom were in after life among the most respectable citizens of the town, had been prepared, in conformity to the secret resolves of the political leaders, to act as circumstances should require. They were 70 or 80 in all, and when every attempt to have the tea returned had failed, it was immediately made known to them, and they proceeded at once to throw the obnoxious merchandise into the water. 1, if not 2 of these parties, wore a kind of Indian disguise. 2 of these persons, in passing over Fort Hill to the scene of operations, met a British officer who, on observing them, naturally enough, drew his sword. As they approached, one of the Indians drew a pistol and said to the officer, "The path is wide enough for us all. We have nothing to do with you and intend you no harm. If you keep your own way peaceably, we shall keep ours." Henry Perkett, Samuel Sprague, and John Hooton, all living in 1835, were apprentices of about the same age. Perkett and Dolbear were apprentices with Peck, the cooper, in Essex Street. While at their work, they heard a loud whistle, which startled them, and which they followed till it brought them to the wharf. Their part of the play was on the flats, by the side of one of the vessels, for it was nearly low tide, and with other boys, by direction of the commander, to break up more thoroughly the fragments of chests and masses of tea thrown over in too great haste. They found their return upon deck much facilitated by the immense pile which had accumulated beneath and around them. The commander acted as an interpreter for those persons, apparently 5 or 6 aboard each vessel, who especially assumed the Indian disguise. These were no doubt among the principal directors of the whole affair. They affected to issue their orders from time to time in an Indian jargon, the interpreter communicating what the chiefs said, attended to the procuring of keys and lights. The raising of the derricks, trampling the tea into the mud, sweeping the decks at the close of the scene, calling up the mate to report whether everything, except of course the tea, was left as they found it, etc. Perkett and Dolbear went home early. Peck, who was believed to be one of the chiefs, came in rather softly at 1 o'clock in the morning. The boys noticed some indications of red paint behind his ears next day. The only tools they used were staves, which they made before starting. David Kinnison, the last survivor of the Tea Party, died at Chicago in 1852 at the great age of 115. He was one of 17 inhabitants of Lebanon, Maine, who had associated themselves together as a political club and who had determined, at all hazards, to destroy the tea, whether assisted or not. Some of them, repairing to Boston, joined the party, and 24, disguised as Indians, hastened on board the ships, 12 armed with muskets and bayonets, the rest with tomahawks and clubs. They expected to have a fight, not doubting that an effort would be made for their arrest, and agreed at the outset to stand by each other to the last. They also pledged themselves not to reveal the names of the party. Owing to the great age of Kinnison, when this relation was made to Mr. Lossing, it is possibly in some particulars erroneous, and is given only as a piece of original evidence and simply for what it is worth. With a British squadron and British troops so near at hand, it seems strange that the party was not interrupted. The probable reason is that something far more serious was expected on any attempt to land the tea, and that the authorities, the owners of the ships, the consignees of the tea, and all others concerned were glad to be thus extricated from a serious dilemma. They, however, could not be called upon to interfere except by the civil authorities in case of a riot. Governor Hutchinson says the tea could have been secured in the town in no other way than by landing Marines from the men of war or bringing to town the regiment which was at the castle to remove the guards from the ships and to take their places. This would have brought on a greater convulsion than there was any danger of in 1770, and it would not have been possible when 2 regiments were forced out of the town for so small a body of troops to have kept possession of the place. He did not suppose such a measure would be approved of in England, nor was he sure of support from any one person in authority. There was not a justice of peace, sheriff, constable, or peace officer in the province who would venture to take cognizance of any breach of law against the general bent of the people. So many of the actors were universally known that a proclamation with a reward for discovery would have been ridiculed. Hutchinson submitted the consideration of the affair to the council, and that body promised to give it attention, but nothing came of it. Of the thousands concerned in the transaction, wrote General Gage to the historian Chalmers, or who were spectators of it, only one witness could be procured to give testimony against them, and that one conditionally that the delinquents should be tried in England. So far as is known, only a single person was arrested, a Mr. Eckley, and he was never brought to trial. A 4th tea ship destined for Boston was wrecked on Cape Cod. The few chests of tea saved from her cargo were, by the governor's order, placed in the castle. 28 chests, brought a little later by another vessel from London on the joint account of Boston merchants, were destroyed by a disguised party on March 7th, 1774. The people of Charlestown destroyed in the marketplace all the tea they could find in the town, paying the owners its value. Other towns did the same. And there we end for part 19. I think it's interesting that they did everything they could to not destroy, to not damage anything except the tea that they were throwing overboard, and to compensate the people who lost the tea for their loss. Interesting. They did things morally that way, it seems. More tomorrow. Make it a great day, and bye for now.